right. Let's see. Check the volume. Welcome. Right. Okay. All right, great. The sound is good. All right, welcome to another Trauma Talk Radio live broadcast with myself, your freedom coach, Nataushia Miller. And we're live tonight on both YouTube and Facebook simultaneously tonight. All right, so Trauma Talk Radio live broadcast, Trauma Talk Radio, period, the podcast is committed to helping people live a freedom from trauma lifestyle, one conversation at a time. And so there's two components of Trauma Talk Radio. One is where I just go out and live my life and do interviews with everyday people, short interviews, just asking them their perspective pertaining to overcoming life traumas. And then two, we have the live broadcast on Mondays here on Facebook at 6 p.m. and typically on YouTube at 5 p.m. But tonight they're combined at 6 p.m. And then on Instagram at 7 p.m. And this is Pacific Standard Time. And then so during the live broadcast, we open up the broadcast with a brief content about trauma. And then we open the lines where viewers can call in for a conversation about the content or anything that may be on their heart pertaining to overcoming the traumas of life. So, welcome. And also, last thing, if no one is present for the live broadcast, we tend to end the live early because Trauma Talk Radio is all about conversation and dialogue. So if no one's here to have a conversation, we will end after the content is shared for the evening. All righty. And that's the overview right there for Trauma Talk Radio. So let's get into our conversation, our content for tonight before we open the lines for viewers to call in via the StreamYard link that I'm going to put in the comments. So I'm wanting to talk about soul trauma recovery this evening, what that is, what that means, and the four components of soul trauma recovery. Soul trauma recovery is the process of healing our soul wounds that we have as a result of traumatic experiences. So healing our soul wounds in the area of our mind, our emotions, and our will. That's like big. And our will is really our power to decide. And so one of the questions that I like to ask is trauma making your decisions? And if in some way trauma is influencing your decisions, then there's a need for soul trauma recovery. There is a need to take back your power to decide, where it is not being influenced by trauma, but it is being steered by your freedom. So that is the purpose of soul trauma recovery. And there's four components to soul trauma recovery. First is healing. Healing is so important. So we have to heal the soul wounds in those areas, and we have to revisit the traumatic experience that opened the door to the soul wound in order to heal. And a lot of times, the healing really takes place with the transformation of the narrative that comes along with the soul wound. So there may have been a particular traumatic experience that caused a soul wound that created a narrative of I am not enough. And that narrative is false. That's what trauma convinced you to believe to be the truth, but that is false pertaining to you. Hey. Welcome. How are you? And so that's the healing component. Number 2 is transformation. There you go. Transformation. So the transformation component is all about eliminating our triggers. It is possible to no longer be triggered in a particular area that we've experienced trauma. Good. All is well. How are you? Thanks for chiming in. Just going over the little content that I have this evening before I open up the lines for viewers to call in should they decide to do so. So we're talking about the 4 components of soul trauma recovery, and we're on 2 now, which is transformation. And it is possible to eliminate triggers to where you're no longer triggered by something that you normally would be as a result of trauma, because during the transformation phase, you've learned how to transform your trauma responses into freedom strategies and your coping mechanisms into conquering methods. Coping is like we're just learning how to live with the pain. Conquering methods is we're healed, we're free from the pain, we're on the other side. And so now I don't no longer need to cope. Why cope when I can conquer? Why survive when I can thrive? So that is the transformation stage. Yes, definitely great topic. Yes, indeed. I know. Triggers. And you know what? The thing about triggers too is that we're all a work in progress. So we can have done the work in certain areas where we no longer have triggers, but we still have triggers in others. Or we could do the work where we no longer have triggers pertaining to any of our past traumas, but experience a new traumatic experience tomorrow. Now we have new triggers. So this is the thing about soul trauma recovery is that it's ongoing. This is a lifelong process. As long as we're here in this world as human beings, with anything can happen all around this type of scenarios. Okay, so it's ongoing. But once we have the tools, we can practice the tool. We're better at practicing the tools where we can eliminate new triggers and things quicker than before because we're practicing these tools. So that's great. Thank you so much for the transparency and letting us know you have triggers, because yeah, you're not alone. Okay, not alone at all. And so we talked about stage 1, the healing, stage 2, the transformation. Stage 4 is the liberation. And what are we being liberated from? We're being liberated from the internalized oppression that our traumas cause. So that's when, we may be stuck in a place of shame. We may be stuck in a place of guilt. We're really stuck in a place of that number 1 aftermath of trauma, which is fear. And shame and guilt is a form of fear. Both of them are a form of fear. Procrastination, a form of fear. Busyness, a form of fear. Any type of addiction, a form of fear. There's so much in our trauma that's rooted in fear. So we want to be liberated from that number 1 trauma aftermath and no longer walk in fear, but truly walk in freedom, freedom from fear. So that's great. And then the final stage is reconstruction. So after we've healed the soul wound, after we've transformed our trauma responses and coping mechanisms, and after we've been liberated from the number one trauma aftermath, which is fear in whichever form that we battle with that makes us feel internally oppressed, now it's time to reconstruct our soul wounds, soul realms. It's time to reconstruct our mind. It's time to reconstruct our emotions. And it's time to reconstruct our will, our power to decide, where it is being all of those components of us internally is solidified and fortified by an internal sense of safety, security, and stability that comes as a result of the soul trauma recovery process. Because remember, our definition of trauma is that it's anything that violates your internal sense of safety, security, and stability. So it's anything that makes you feel internally unsafe, insecure, emotionally, mentally, spiritually unstable. But with the soul trauma recovery process, we can reconstruct our soul to where no matter what happens externally, we still feel safe, secure, and stable internally. And that is the goal of soul trauma recovery. All right. It's like new traumas come, we are not triggered. We don't revert to our default system of how we would navigate traumas in the past, but we will automatically activate and walk in our new tools with a solution oriented mindset, with our emotional intelligence, with our ability to have conflict resolution. We're in the place of the realm of resolve rather than the residue of the trauma. So exciting. That's so exciting to me. So that's that with that. That is that with that. So that is the conclusion of our content for this evening on the 4 components of soul trauma recovery, what soul trauma recovery is, and why it is necessary. Woohoo! Now, I don't see anyone still here for the live. We had a couple of pop-ups during the content session, but no one is still present for me to answer any questions or see if anyone would like to call in. So I'm going to get ready to roll out. But before I go, let me give some announcements. We have coming up, what we have coming up? A couple of intensives, virtual intensives are coming up. One on anxiety, another on grief. So for that information, visit my website for the details and to register. I'll put my website up too. Okay. So visit my website, www.c4lglobal.com. Also, for our interview shorts where I'm out with the people, I'm actually doing interview shorts, Dear Freedom Coach interviews, where you all have an opportunity to submit a question. And during one of those clips, I'm going to answer your question. So you're going to interview me. And I typically post my interviews where I'm answering your questions on Saturdays and Sundays. Monday through Friday, it will be with others. But on Saturdays and Sundays are the ones is when you'll see my interview clips come up with me answering your questions. So visit my website also if you would like to submit a particular question for me to answer during that time. Let me see if there's any other announcements. I think that's it for now. Yeah. All right. So that is all for now, you all. I am about to roll out. If you're available on the round, meet me on Instagram at 7 p.m. Until next Monday, I will see you all soon. This is your freedom coach, Nataushia Miller, signing off until next Monday for another Trauma Talk Radio Live broadcast. Woo-hoo. Peace and freedom.